I'd like to welcome our webinar guests and those who will be listening to this morning's talk on YouTube. And before I get started talking about spiritual tests, I do want to remind you that we have our annual Living Ethics Agni Yoga conference coming up in about 7 or 8 weeks. We always have our conference in the middle of March around Master's Day, sometime around Master's Day, which is on the 24th of March. And we would like you to know very much that you are invited if you have an interest in Agni Yoga. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that I'll be talking more in depth during the conference about spiritual tests. So today will be like just an introduction to what spiritual tests are and how they affect us in our day-to-day life. And then in March, when our conference starts up, we'll explore it a little bit more in depth. But this is what I've been thinking about regarding spiritual tests. It's like, I remember back when I was attending the University of Iowa, and I deplored tests. It was so difficult for me. I would have to study for days before I was ready to take just the interim tests. And when it came to the semester test, I was just a wreck. I couldn't do anything. I would be up all night long taking NoDoz so I could stay awake, and I was going to get an A on that test no matter what. So I'm programmed not to like tests. I don't know if the rest of you have that kind of programming or not. Perhaps some of you do, some of you don't. But I found that the more prepared I was for the test, the more successful the results of taking that test would be. And that's no different than taking spiritual tests. The difference between taking tests in school and tests that are given to us by God or by nature or by a teacher is that this kind of test, we have the opportunity to walk away with something extra than we did when we went into that test. And the second thing is to know is that these tests will come back to us several times over to see if we really were prepared, to see what we gained from taking that first test, what we learned from it, how it improved us, how it released more light from us, because we are all about helping our soul to evolve. So these tests are not tests of punishment. These tests are not to define our professional life. These tests are to enable our divinity to move into the reality of the purpose of life. So that's just an introduction to help move your mind away from a dislike of testing to an anticipation of what is to come. Today's talk is directed to the spiritual student, the one who is serious, really serious about his or her evolution and the evolution of humanity. And it's important to put those two ideas together. For the spiritual student who's really serious, it's not just about personal evolvement, personal evolution, but it is also concern about the evolution of humanity. So that tells us it's like a subtlety of our own personal dedication to, first of all, discovering our purpose in life, and then dedicating ourselves to the evolution of our soul, of our life. It is for the purpose of humanity. It's not for a personal what's the phrase, self-aggrandizement. It has nothing to do with that. And that's where spiritual students sometimes mess up. They think it's all about me, all about me. But in fact, someday you're going to grow out of that attitude and realize that if you are progressing, your friends are going to benefit from the light. As your friends benefit from the light, your community is going to benefit. Your group will benefit. So we're all, in fact, going to be supporting and inspiring one another in such a way that it penetrates into our inner life and our soul. Wow, okay, let me move forward. So eventually, that self-centered individual that is progressing just for themselves will one day realize, wow, this is not about me. This is about my family. It's about my group. It's about my community and nation. It's about humanity. Now, the test that I'm talking about today, let me reiterate this, it is about conscious people, or AKA disciples of the Trans-Himalayan teaching. So this is a little different from a religious person and how they perceive tests. This is about a disciple who is here to serve humanity. So the tests that are given to such a person, this is interesting. If we can see a test as a keynote to the purpose of our soul, then expand that idea of the keynote being part of a symphonic piece of music, and that our whole life is an orchestration built around this keynote, the keynote being service, and the keynote being our field of service. So as these tests come to us, they are notes to evoke greater harmony in the keynote of the orchestration of our life. Whereas spiritual tests given to I'm going to be karmic for this, but I can't think of any better way to put it. People who are on a religious path, so they can get themselves right with God. This goes beyond getting ourselves right. See that? So this is the difference between being a religious person and a spiritual person, that we see ourselves as part of humanity. So the joy for us when we eventually recognize that, well, I think this is a spiritual test, to realize that this is a test designed to work for the evolution of our soul, our family, our group, our community, our nation, and humanity. So it's more specific, okay? During this time of testing, the disciple will find his or her soul group, and from there will ultimately engage in world service. This expansion of service can happen in one life or over several lives. So expansion of service, remember that phrase. Okay, testing, expansion of service, finding the soul group, and engaging in world service. This expansion of service can happen in one life or over several lifetimes. It's important to remember that. And this is something I'll be talking about in conference. This one life indicates the disciple has been in training for several incarnations and is now prepared for world service. Such students in the Trans-Himalayan teaching are called disciples. Disciples are what? They are fountains of energy. Very simple definition. So let us try to shift our consciousness from the old definition of disciples and religion to disciples gearing themselves up for world service and thus becoming fountains of energy. Such disciples will take this stream of energy and direct it into the world to create a more progressive environment, or a more, how can I say this, an environment to engage people in such a way they begin to aspire toward their life purpose. So this means that we want to create for ourselves and those that we are in a relationship with, whether that relationship is with the plant kingdom, the mineral kingdom, the animal kingdom, the human kingdom, the superhuman kingdom. We want to create an environment that is in alignment with the natural life. The natural life, from the lowest to the highest. Okay? So it's so beautiful. Disciples are also those individuals who try to assimilate the teaching. Some of us call the teaching the Ageless Wisdom teaching. Others call it the Trans-Himalayan teaching, the perennial teaching. We know it as the teachings of the hierarchy, the teachings of humanity, and how we actualize this teaching in our lives. That's the disciple. So, as we try to assimilate these teachings, we need to understand what assimilation is. I think most of us know that assimilation does not mean accumulation. Accumulation of knowledge. When people have told me I've read all of the books of Agni Yoga, and they stand back and wait for me to be impressed, and I say, well, tell me, what is your favorite book? Okay, then what part of that book really spoke to you? What did you learn from it? How did it speak to you? What did it mean to you? How are you putting it into your life? And the more, these kinds of questions are being asked of the person, that person realizes just reading those books is only step one. It's the test is, how well did you assimilate what you read? Meaning, how much of it did you understand and then incorporate it into your whole being, from the mineral kingdom to the superhuman kingdom? Are we taking what we've assimilated and really putting it into our lives? Assimilation increases your power. Assimilation increases your power. It enables you to occupy a prominent position in any environment, whether it is in your family life, in your group life, in your professional life. It enables you to occupy a prominent position in society, whether it is within the esoteric community or the outer life. We have some really great leaders in the esoteric community, and those leaders need to be recognized for their power. more subjective power than objective power. Their subjective life will be more powerful, more radiant, more influential than the power of a person who may be the head of the World Bank. So this is assimilation. It increases your power as a disciple. Living such a life presents many tests to us to make us realize what? Our worth, our readiness, and our weaknesses, and accordingly adjust our life for spiritual responsibilities. People have forgotten that the teachers of humanity supervise and guide those who enter into the sphere of their service. And I'm going to repeat this, okay? Okay. People have forgotten that the teachers of humanity supervise and guide those who enter into the sphere of their service. Those who demonstrate selfless striving and perseverance are subjected to probations and testings in order to see if they are ready for promotion in the field of their special service. So if you are in the same place you were 10 years ago, or 20 or 30 years ago, then you need to start praying that these tests come a little bit faster and more furiously. Because we are all about transformation and change and progress and advancement in order to eventually be of world service. Again, as a reminder, it may take several incarnations to position yourself in that manner. But don't wait until your next life. Do it right now. Begin to recognize these tests. Begin to place a high value on probationary periods. Learn to recognize them as moments or opportunities that have been given to you to advance your state of beingness, to expand your consciousness. See, the mistake that so many people make is that it lets success, this is an air quote success, means to them, it builds their ego. See, that's not discipleship. That's just being an average person. But that is a trap that disciples fall into. So let us not fall into such traps of egoism and vanity, but remain humble. It is only through such tests we can prove our worth to ourselves and to the supervising teachers, to be ready to handle greater responsibilities. Every period of spiritual probation and testing reveals weaknesses and potential. Weaknesses and potential. And the disciple and the teachers act accordingly to make the field of our service more fruitful. So if you, what is this word? If you have this woebegone approach to, I'm too busy, I have too much responsibility, I can't handle this, then you're not passing your tests. Because one of the fruits of passing these tests is increase of energy, the increase of power, and more. Now, sometimes these periods of probation and testing are noticed by the disciple, and sometimes he goes through them without being aware of them. If he is aware of them, he can work more consciously to fit himself into the requirements for higher service. If he has found his soul group, listen to this carefully, if that disciple has found his or her soul group, then his awareness increases and his consciousness expands. That's where the power of the soul group eases itself into the life of the divinity of that individual. If we have found our soul group, that awareness then increases during the periods of probation and testing, and our consciousness expands. The great sage Master Morya says, every 3 years we give the disciple the possibility of expressing himself in regard to a similar event. I'm going to repeat this. Every 3 years, we give the disciple the possibility of expressing himself in regard to a similar event. Only according to these dates may one see the fluctuation of selfhood, cooperation, patience, and devotion. What goes around comes around? Okay. There are subjective and objective tests. In our objective consciousness, or outer consciousness, under the pressure of the environment, under the pressure of reading, under the pressure of aspiration, we begin to change our relationships with people and with life in general. But often, for a long time, we remain the same in our subjective levels. So we can change our outer life, but our inner life hasn't changed yet. For example, the disciple may act honestly as long as he knows that people or authorities are watching him. But he does not act so honestly when he enters into the astral world, into the astral plane. This is because he feels more free in the astral plane, and he thinks that no one is watching. This then indicates the teaching has not been assimilated. See? That it's not being absorbed in the higher planes by the disciple. And he has not actualized the higher principles that are found in the subjective planes. However, it's like Big Brother is watching. But Big Brother in this case are the teachers. Our earthly plane teacher, our subjective plane teachers, the senior disciples and initiates of the Master are all watching us, not to reprimand, but to see how we are growing. Because when, how can I say, it's so beautiful, and I can't always find the physical words to communicate. This is an aphorism, I guess we could say, from the teaching. When the higher and the lower meet, you know that phrase, when the higher and the lower meet, that means when our unfolding human soul finally engages consciously with the light, love, and power of the solar angel, and then the teacher with the ashram, and then hierarchy, we are on our journey throughout our whole journey, we are moved from this position to this, to that, increasingly finding our responsibilities becoming more important, more dedicated to world service. But if it's our ego and vanity that's increasing, then when we begin to function on that astral plane, the teacher sees that we're not yet ready because our outer life is a facade. It's the inner life that's real as we move into that astral plane and we think no one's watching us. See my point? Okay. There's the lower and the higher meet. To find out the facts and degree of transformation of the disciple, the teachers subject the person to various tests in the astral and lower mental planes. And periodically they watch the one to see how much progress he has made or how he is fluctuating between the two polarities. And then a meeting takes place. The teacher that's responsible for the students, they'll all get together and they'll have a discussion and to see what work still needs to be done through testing and through probation to help that student progress. Or they may decide that it's not possible to work with that person any longer in this incarnation, in that particular incarnation. And we'll have to wait until our next incarnation for them to take another look at us and see if we're ready. Is that clear? Okay. So they watch us to see how much progress we have made or how we are fluctuating between these two polarities, the astral and the mental, lower mental. The tests carried on in the astral plane are through our dreams, through our desires, and through our wishes. To see if we are honest, the disciple is honest in the same degree as he was in his physical consciousness, or is as detached as he is in the physical consciousness, or is as devoted as in the physical consciousness. On the mental plane, the person's subjective thoughts toward a certain event, are observed in order to see what degree of refinement that we have accomplished in our thinking. Daily or psychically or periodically, we are tested for our different feelings and emotions and actions and reactions to a similar event. So the good news of this is these similar events come back to us over and over and over again to see if we have refined ourselves. See if we are expanding our consciousness. See if we are growing and increasing our light. Another way we are tested is for a quality of thought regarding a similar object or situation or event. And this is where the soul group comes into play. The soul group is anchored in the ashram, in the light and love and power of the subjective ashram. The teacher is the mediator between the ashram, the subjective ashram, and the physical plane ashram. It's like this teacher, in a sense, is like that electrical energy, the conduit, that brings that energy into the group through vision, through responsibilities being distributed, through different events, subjective and objective events, And then we are tested for our quality of thought through similar situations, similar events, in both the subjective and objective worlds. Do you see why these are tests for disciples and not for the ordinary person? The disciple must have some relationship between his outer and inner life. In other words, between his personality life and his soul life. In the beginning, the disciple, is not made aware of the tests in order to avoid the excitement and artificiality of reactions and responses. To avoid the artificiality of the reactions and responses. But as he advances, he begins to become aware of the operation of the tests, first vaguely and then more consciously. So now that we're listening to this lecture, our responsibility for recognition increases. Recognition of these tests and probations. After many years of probation, more awareness of the tests often will make that person more cooperative, more alert, and more striving. So for a long time, the teachers relate to their disciples at a distance and want to remain unnoticed so as not to overstimulate the disciple and lead him to mechanical, artificial responses. They want the person to grow by his inner power, to sprout and conquer difficulties and hindrances. In other words, to develop his inner or latent powers. So here are some of the tests, and these are just, I'm going to give you a list of one word, basically, and then you can elaborate. Self-image. These are some of the tests. Your moral nature. Your power of endurance and perseverance. Also your stability. Your skill in service. Your diplomacy and your wisdom. Your creativity. Isn't that interesting to be tested in our creativity? Our sensitivity and intuition will be tested. Our readiness of response. Our level of subjective contacts will be tested. Our sensitivity to the impressions coming from higher sources. And our accuracy of recording them. Our ability and skill in handling attacks. And the ability to stand under the pressure of our soul level work. Of course, there are finer and higher tests to which the disciple is subjected, and they come to the disciple, but they come to the disciple at the proper time to make him or her ready for greater usefulness. As you advance, you realize that your life as a whole is set in such a way that it is a path of tests. You can see that the people around him, his body, his emotions and thoughts and events, all that compose his life are nothing else but a well-organized series of tests. the evolution, the growth, the creativity, and the usefulness. The evolution, the growth, the creativity, and the usefulness of a disciple are forged by his ability to pass through these tests with nobility and fearlessness and faith that the divinity in him will eventually reach the cross of glory. The cross of glory. Christianity translated this as a state of beingness which rests in happiness and joy and bliss. But in actuality, the cross of glory is a state of beingness in which the disciple commits himself to world service. He is tested and trusted and tempered to go into the complicated, stormy, intricate field of world service. As a disciple, it's very important because we have people that position themselves in ways that they feel they are important, but it is self-importance. It is not selfless. It's like I was watching a World News Report this morning about the life of, who's the guy that founded Microsoft Word? Bill Gates, is it? And they were giving statistics of what this man has done in foreign countries by inoculation. And in this one country, they went from, and I'm not being factual with these facts. That doesn't seem right. I'm specific and accurate with these facts, but it went from a particular disease where like 500,000 children were dying to this year 400. I mean, that's pretty dramatic. This is world service in a selfless manner. He wasn't even up there boasting about what he was doing. It was a report of what this man has done. The cross of glory is a state of beingness in which the disciple commits himself to world service. President Clinton, former President Clinton, is the same thing. His wife, Hillary Clinton, same thing. So think about people. Nelson Mandela. We're so fortunate to have such disciples in the world today. Such a disciple, whether it is people on our level or people on the level of a Bill Gates and President Clinton and Hillary Clinton and Nelson Mandela, we are tested and trusted and tempered to go into that complicated, stormy, intricate field of world service. And the whole world makes us conscious of what these people have gone through. The media I'm talking about. And they always approach them in such a negative way, in such a critical way, in such a opinionated way. But we're not going to do that because we're going to stand back with ourselves and with these great world leaders and have compassion for them and for us, because these are the tests that the teachers are putting us through to position us with even greater responsibility. So the crown of glory is symbolized by the crown of thorns on the head of Christ when the servant of darkness led him to the cross. There he demonstrated all that he had spiritually actualized in his life. Disciples do not run after rest, heaven, or paradise. Their rest, their heaven, their paradise are the fields of their sacrificial service. They have committed their life to what? To enlighten, to lead, to protect, to encourage, to bring joy, to be an example, to create, and to heal. These are the sources of their joy, and each thorn of their crown is a witness to their victory over malicious attacks of the dark ones to prevent their service in the world. For disciples, the nature of their tests change periodically. It changes periodically. Periodically, they are subjected to so-called tests of happiness, success, victory, position, and devotion to see how much they have grown to be indifferent to these traps. Some disciples pass easily through the tests of a painful nature, but fluctuate in tests that are of a pleasant nature. All these tests have a common goal: to encourage the disciple to be useful, tempered, trustworthy servant in the divine plan. On this path of tests and trials, success and failure, defeat and victory, these disciples develop the power of detachment. The more they increase in this power, the closer they come to their true self. This does not mean detachment from feelings or detachment from compassion or from detachment from real relationships with one another. It means a detachment from the personality, from the form life, from expectation, from prejudice, from opinions. They develop the power of detachment. The more they increase in this power, the closer they come to their true self, and the greater fusion they achieve with the all-self. So that's just the introduction. Right. And we'll talk more about this and discuss more of this during our conference in March. So again, let me invite you to our conference if you have an interest in Agni Yoga, the path of Agni Yoga, the teachings of the Trans-Himalayan Ageless Wisdom Mystery Teaching. And you can go to our website, White Mountain Education Association's website, go to upcoming events, and you will find a registration form there and a schedule of what will be taking place.